You saw her standing in the doorway with a broken mirror pressed to her chest, and she dared you to see yourself in it. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She only tilted the shards so each reflection showed a different man. One weeping, one furious, one begging, but not one remained standing. You stood still, and in that silence, something shifted. Not in her, in the game. She left the door open like an unfinished sentence. And you almost stepped through, not because you wanted to, but because the illusion was shaped like closure. She doesn't need love. She needs echoes. She needs reaction. She needs the sound of her control landing inside your soul like a cathedral bell, invisible, but loud enough to ring through your bones. But what happens when the echo dies in the throat? What happens when you don't move, if this whisper already knows you let it echo? Like the video, leave your shadow in the comments, subscribe, and stay near the silence. She shines brightest when you flinch, but the moment you stop performing, her script burns to ash. She claps before the play begins, and that sound, that hollow strike of palm on palm, is not applause. It's a command. You enter the stage like every man before you, believing you were chosen. But you weren't cast, you were baited. She doesn't need a co-star. She needs a mirror that talks back when cued. You hear the lights buzzing above, feel their heat on your face. You say your first line. She smiles. Not because of the words, but because you still believe they're yours. Every reaction you give becomes her scenery. Every doubt, her cue. You think you're dancing freely, but you're inside a puppet theater stitched from flattery and silence. She never shouts. She doesn't have to. One breath, one subtle withdrawal, and your spine folds on command. You adjust, you soothe, you interpret shadows like scripture. You're already off script, and she loves it. The play is rewriting itself through your need to stay inside it. She paints herself in half-truths and pauses. She leaves gaps for you to fill, traps baited with empathy. You try to understand her silence, not realizing it's a net. Each time you search for the real her, you're picking up nails and calling them flowers. You see sadness and offer comfort. You see anger and offer apology. But none of it is hers. It's what you invent to keep the stage alive. You start performing roles she never asked for: the loyal one, the healer, the mind reader. But you were never meant to succeed, only to respond, only to prove your usefulness against her growing void. Because the moment you fall silent, the script collapses. She cannot monologue without your background noise. Her power depends entirely on your participation. But by the time you suspect this, you've already tied yourself to the spotlight like it's a lifeline. The curtain never falls. That's the trick. She loops scenes, rewinds fights, resurrects dead moments as though they were still happening, so you never leave, only replay. Even silence becomes another act. You step back, she sobs louder. You leave. She posts a photo from your favorite place. Not for nostalgia, for control. She doesn't need closure. She needs your orbit. Your reactions are her gravity. If you stop revolving, she loses mass. You begin to wonder if she loves you, or only the audience inside you, the part of you that watches yourself being loved and tries to deserve it. You recall how she once looked at you not like a man, but like a stage, empty, clean, waiting to be flooded with her light. And you wanted to be worthy of it. You let her script your emotions until you forgot which were yours. You mistake her mystery for depth, her aloofness for trauma. But it's theater, and she's been directing since childhood. One night, you stop speaking. Not out of anger, out of absence. Your eyes remain still when hers dance for a spark. You nod but don't lean forward. You listen, but the inner stage remains dark. That's when it happens. A shift so small it could be missed, but not by her. She sees the curtain dropping behind your gaze. She hears the silence not as rejection, but as annihilation. You've stopped performing. You've unplugged her script from your nervous system, and suddenly she's no longer in the spotlight. She's just standing, alone, without applause, without audience. That's when she accuses you of coldness, emotional neglect, being distant. She paints herself as the playwright who was betrayed by an ungrateful actor. But it's not betrayal, it's absence. And absence is her undoing. She can reshape guilt, manipulate love, distort language, but she cannot command a void. You've become the one thing she cannot use, a space without sound. And that space, it terrifies her. She dances faster now, rewrites herself in desperation. She sends memories like confetti, texts soaked in nostalgia, photos of moments you barely recall but now feel summoned to grieve. You sense her panic, not for your love, but for the stage you've abandoned. She wants her echo back. She wants to hear herself through your mouth again, but your silence is no longer passive. It's surgical. It slices through every illusion without saying a word. Still, part of you aches, not for her, but for the part of you that once believed this was real, that if you acted perfectly, she would reward you with something permanent, something true. But you see now the spotlight was always artificial. It made you visible, yes, but only as a character, never as yourself. You remember the first time she pulled away, how you blamed yourself. You bent backwards, forward, sideways, a contortionist in the dark, and she clapped, but not because you were close, because you were obedient. She rewarded instability with affection and punishment with silence. You learned quickly, too quickly, how to earn the bare minimum, how to decode her moods before she even named them. You thought it was love. It was training. Now she stands there, rehearsing sadness like a soliloquy. But you see it. Not the tears, the script behind them, the calculation, the subtle shifts in tone, timing, expression. She's not trying to reach you. She's trying to re-hook you. And the only thing more painful than her cruelty is how good she is at pretending it never existed. You no longer perform. You no longer explain your stillness. You don't demand understanding or resolution. You just become uncatchable. She senses it before you say a word. Your silence now hums with detachment, not submission. And that, to her, is a betrayal worse than infidelity. Because silence, true silence, is not emptiness. It is the rejection of illusion. It is the refusal to hold up the mirror any longer. And without a mirror, she cannot see herself. Without reaction, she cannot exist. Her spotlight dims, not because the bulb is broken, but because no one is watching. And in that fading light, she realizes you were never the actor. You were the electricity. You were the source. She was only ever performing to keep your attention alive. But the stage is cold now. The floorboards don't creak when you step away. There's no dramatic ending, no curtain call, just the hum of a theater emptying and her whisper fading like a line never finished. She'll rewrite this, of course. Turn it into a story where you abandoned her. She'll perform it for others. But no matter how many times she acts it out, something will gnaw at her, a silence that cannot be named. And that silence is you. Her seduction is famine dressed as banquet, and your hunger is the only dish ever served. It begins like a miracle, a table laid out before you, draped in velvet mystery, silver candlesticks flickering with promise. She offers you wine before you're thirsty, laughter before you're ready, secrets before you've asked. Her eyes say, stay, but not with clarity, with gravity. You sit, of course, You don't question the banquet. How could you? You're starving for something you can't name, and she looks like the answer served warm. She feeds you stories dripping with implication, half sorrows coated in sugar, childhood wounds she shares like gifts, not confessions. She doesn't want comfort, she wants witness. You think your role is to care, but it isn't. It's to devour her pain and call it intimacy. Each word she offers is bait, each smile a garnish on your own expectations. You think, I see her. You think, I'm different. I'll stay. I'll help. But you don't realize the table was set long before you arrived, and you were always meant to starve. She withholds more than she gives, but in such exquisite ways you thank her for it. A compliment half finished, a touch delayed, an answer answered with silence. You begin filling in the gaps with longing. The lack becomes holy. You ache, and she mirrors it back as romance. You misunderstand absence as depth. You mistake confusion for desire, and each time you taste less, you beg more. You start fasting just to deserve the crumbs. You stop asking for your needs. You shrink your hunger to fit her pace. You admire the way she eats only the parts of you that ache, never the parts that demand. She's allergic to certainty. You think that makes her delicate. No, it makes her sovereign. She decides when you get fed and when you sit in the dark. And like a good guest, you stay seated. You call it patience. She calls it control. There are moments, of course, when she feeds you just enough. A message at 2 a.m., a tear that rolls out exactly when you threaten to leave, a flash of jealousy that feels like love but tastes like ownership. You eat these moments like sacred fruit, but they never last. The table resets overnight. The chairs move. The candles die out. She always disappears before the final course. She never lets you feel full. That's the design. Fullness is freedom, and freedom is the end of the game. She compliments your kindness only when it serves her. She praises your sensitivity only when you apologize. She tests your loyalty through silence, your passion through punishment. You think these are trials of love. They are not. They are rituals of power. She needs your appetite alive but never satisfied. You are more useful when you are starving. Hunger makes men poetic. Desperation makes them obedient. You don't realize how thin you've become, not in body, but in soul. You start apologizing before she's angry. You predict her mood by the way she exhales. You don't speak your truth, you adjust it, bend it, dilute it, and every time she smirks at your compliance, you feel chosen. But it's not choice, it's harvesting. She harvests your yearning like a crop she never intends to eat, only to sell, only to showcase. You are not her lover. You are her currency. The more you starve, the more poetic you become. You write her letters you never send. You fantasize about moments that never happened. You mistake the dream of her for the memory of her. And worst of all, you begin to romanticize your own depletion. You say things like, I'd do anything for her. You call it loyalty, but it's malnourishment with a ribbon on top. You are shrinking, and she claps. One night, you ask for more. Not rudely, not angrily, just more clarity, presence, a plan. She freezes. Her smile doesn't crack, it calcifies. You've violated the rule. You've broken the trance. She gives you a look you've never seen before, not cruel, but bored. Like the meal is no longer amusing, and you realize she doesn't feed to nourish. She feeds to keep you seated. You stand, not dramatically, not loudly, just upright, and you see it. The table was always made of fog. The candles were electric. The wine, dyed water. None of it was real. You weren't eating. You were hallucinating. and she was never eating with you, only watching how much you'd swallow without protest. When you leave, she won't chase, not immediately. She'll let you feel the hunger fully until it feels like grief. She knows you'll miss the ache more than the affection. That's the trick. She doesn't create love, she creates addiction. And when you mistake withdrawal for heartbreak, you'll crawl back not for her, but for the meal you imagined. But this time, you don't. You feel the emptiness rise, but you don't call it love. You let it gnaw. You let the ache speak, and it says, you were never fed. You were displayed. You were tested. You were used. And that voice, quiet, shaking, ashamed, is your first true nourishment. Still, she sends signals, a song you once shared, a story that mirrors your pain. She lays breadcrumbs, but not to bring you home to lure you back to the table. She wants your hunger reborn. She wants your ache to knock on her door like a beggar. But you don't knock. You stay outside, cold, confused, human. And you realize hunger is not romantic. It's manipulation stitched in silk. One day, another man will sit at her table. He'll smile like you did. He'll sip the wine. He'll call it magic. And you'll ache for him, not her. You'll want to scream run, but you won't, because you know the hunger must complete its ritual until he learns the banquet was always a mask. And you'll find food elsewhere, not in mystery, but in truth, not in seduction, but in safety, not in scarcity, but in presence. The first time someone feeds you fully, you'll flinch. You'll feel guilty for accepting, but slowly, you'll learn love does not need starvation. Affection does not require sacrifice. The meal does not demand your silence. And when she appears again, as they always do, with her velvet table and flickering charm, you won't be cruel, you won't be angry, you'll simply be full. And that fullness, it will terrify her more than any insult, because it means you're not coming back. And she can't eat that. She needs you to see her because she cannot see herself. But the moment you vanish, the reflection rots. She was never looking at you, only through you, like someone squinting into a mirror lit by borrowed electricity, checking if her mask still clings the way she rehearsed it. Her gaze, though seductive, was not searching, it was sculpting, shaping her face by your reactions, sharpening her angles by the hunger in your pupils. She never needed your truth. She needed your reflection. You thought you were being loved. You were being used as a surface. You remember how she looked at you when you were still innocent before suspicion found its footing. She smiled not with her lips, but with your longing. You mistook her fascination for intimacy, but now you know she wasn't admiring your soul. She was admiring how clearly she could see herself inside your desire. You lit up when she entered the room, and in that light, she adjusted her pose. Every expression, every pause, every wounded sigh rehearsed in the mirror of your reaction. You were not a partner, you were a frame. Her self-worth required it. A gilded outline that held the portrait she painted not of who she is, but who she wants the world to fear or adore. The tragic muse, the misunderstood genius, the siren too deep to decipher. And the moment you stop believing the portrait, the image cracked. She cannot exist without being watched. That is her curse. Alone, she begins to rot. Not physically, symbolically. Identity to her is not anchored internally. It is tethered to the gaze of others. She needs you to confirm she's still worthy, still beautiful, still elusive. She doesn't ask who she is. She asks, how does he see me? And when you stop looking, not with hatred, but with disinterest, her foundation trembles. You thought disappearing would make you cruel, but it made you real, because only now can you see how she feeds on being seen. Not understood, not cherished, seen. Your attention was not a gift to her, it was oxygen, and once you cut it off, she began to suffocate in the mirror with no glass. There's no reflection when you walk away. She tries, of course, reaches for her phone, posts pictures meant to pierce, crafts captions that sound like poems but smell like bait. She texts something cryptic. You always disappear when I need you most. But that's not vulnerability. That's a flare. She's not lost. She's tracking your eyes, wondering why they've gone dark. You don't respond, not out of cruelty, but clarity. You've realized something devastating. Her pain is a theater, and your sympathy buys the ticket. She doesn't feel seen unless someone reacts. And if no one reacts, she disappears from herself. You once thought your love would save her, but now you know your love was just a flashlight pointed at a ghost. Still, some part of you aches, not for her, but for the version of you who tried to be her mirror, who polished yourself into someone reflective, who muted your needs so her face wouldn't crack. You remember how you stopped speaking about your joy, afraid it would outshine her sorrow. You remember how you shrank when she spiraled, hoping your silence would hold her up. But the truth is, you never held her. You only held the illusion she projected through you. She changes when no one's watching. That's the terrifying part, not the cruelty, the shapelessness. She becomes a stranger in her own absence. Without your gaze, her identity disintegrates. You were her scaffolding, not her partner. And now, in your vanishing, the structure collapses, but she won't show it. She'll pretend nothing changed. She'll smile in public, laugh louder, perform self-love like a monologue she's memorized. But at night, when the lights dim and no one calls her name, she stares at herself and finds nothing looking back. Because you weren't just a witness, you were a mirror with memory. You held her contradictions without shattering. You reflected her better than she could reflect herself. And now she's surrounded by surfaces that only show angles, not depths. People who echo her lines, but never read her silence. People who call her beautiful, but never ask why she's always sad when no one's watching. And she will try again, not to find herself, but to rebuild the mirror. With someone new, someone eager, someone naive enough to mistake performance for truth. She'll feed them admiration. She'll let them think they've unlocked her. She'll study their reactions like a director, and she will reflect again not her soul, but her mask. But masks rot when worn too long, and she knows it. That's why she moves quickly, never still, never quiet. Stillness means facing the void. Quiet means hearing the truth. She needs noise, applause, echoes, anything to prove she still exists, because without a mirror, she becomes myth, and myths die in silence. You see it now clearly. She never wanted to be loved. She wanted to be believed. And love demands contradiction. Belief demands blindness. You offered love, and she punished you. Because love notices. Love questions. Love removes the costume. And belief lets her perform forever. And yet she might whisper your name again, in the mouths of others, in the shadows of stories told sideways. He was too cold. He couldn't handle me. He didn't see the real me. But those words are not accusations. They're grief disguised as blame. She's mourning your gaze, your reflection, your patience. Because no matter how many mirrors she builds, none of them will know her silences the way you did. None of them will see her unravel and stay. And that is your revenge, if you can call it that. Not rage, not exposure, just vanishing. You took away the one thing she couldn't fake, the reflection that made her feel real. You left the mirror, and she saw only fog. Now, when she looks at herself, she doesn't see a goddess. She sees absence, her own. The person beneath the performance, the one she never built. And you walk without mirrors now. You no longer need to be watched to feel whole. You speak truths even when no one's listening. You feel joy without display. And love, when it returns, won't be a reflection. It'll be a presence. And if she finds you again, as they always try, she'll notice something strange. She'll smile her smile. She'll speak her riddles. But they won't land. They won't stick. Because there's nothing left in you to reflect her. You are no longer glass. You are stone. And stone cannot be seduced. She'll turn away, confused. Not wounded, confused. Because her face no longer changes when you're near. And that, to her, is unthinkable. Because in the end, she was never the mirror. She was only the need to be seen. You left the mirror in a quiet room. The light was off. The frame cracked. No reflection, just dust. But some nights, you still feel it breathe. Not her, the version of you who stayed too long. The question still hanging in that dark glass. If no one sees her, does she exist?